Dobro večer i veliki pozdrav svima koji su se uključili u treću ediciju našeg WooCommerce meetupa. Da, i dalje smo u online varijanti, s obzirom na cijelu situaciju ne želimo izazivati vraga i nekakva velika kupljenja u zatvorenom nisu baš sad trenutno najpoželjnija stvar. Znamo da to nije to, dok se ljudi ne vide uživo i dok nemaju pivicu u ruci, dok ne rade nekakav chit chat, ali što je tu je, nekako znanje možemo dijeliti preko ekrana, a vjerujem da je većina vas je već naviknuta na remote način rada u ove 2 godine, tako da vjerujem da vam i ovakav tip online događanja nije stran. S obzirom da imamo strane goste, ja ću se sad prebaciti na engleski, tako da i oni kuže što pričamo. So I'm going to switch to English right now. Our main guest is Jeff. So Jeff, hello. We're so glad to have you here with us.
Hey, Bruno.
And he has a special guest star, Ken from USA, all the way from San Francisco. Hey, Ken.
Hey, everyone.
So basically, Jeff and Ken, before I introduce you, I just want to say to all of our participants, if they have after the presentation, we have reserved some time for the Q&A session. So if they have any questions for both of you, you can ask them then. If you think you have to interrupt both of the guys during their session, feel free to do so. They will be more than glad to answer your questions on the spot. Also, if you are shy and you don't want to be heard or seen, you can type your questions in the chat box. I'm going to read it for our guest. How did we get to this today's lecture? So basically, Neuralab is a WordPress VIP partner for over a year now. What that means is that with our specific expertise in strategy, design and development, we work closely with the WordPress VIP team on building web solutions for enterprise clients. In addition to that, we also have the opportunity to grab some high-level foreign speakers from their lecture pool and bring them to this little community. So we are here today with 2 of those guys. For this edition of Zagreb WooCommerce meetup, our guest is a highly charismatic individual, I would say, with excellent communication skills and I believe over 20 years of experience in the industry, right, Jeff?
Yeah, it's very old.
Nah, I wouldn't say so. He's able to range from strong technical all the way to overall general management. And for the last 2 years, he's been working with WordPress VIP, helping out various blue chip companies. I didn't know until today that Ken is going to join us, so I'm going to give the floor to Jeff so he can introduce him to all of us. So Jeff, the floor is yours. Good luck and give us a good show.
Yeah, I'll do my very best, and thanks everyone. And like I said to Bruno at the beginning, this will be in English. My Croatian is non-existent, so all in English, but we're good. And Ken is actually the star of this show. Ken is all the way from WooCommerce himself. He runs customer success for there. And Ken, maybe if you could introduce yourself, that would be easier than me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Ken Lam. I'm based near San Francisco. I live outside of the city. I lead the WooCommerce customer success team. It's a new team, so I'll talk a little bit about the team as part of my introduction. A little bit of background on myself. I joined Woo in December of this year to build out the team, so we are hiring into the team. Prior to this, I was with I led the post-sales team at Sugar CRM for a few years. So I worked with a lot of agencies, built that team from pretty much 0 to about 70 people. And with some offices in Eastern Europe too, so I'm sort of familiar with the region. And then after that, I joined a company called Anaplan, and I led part of the customer success group, and then ended up owning professional services right around the time Anaplan went IPO. So really looking forward to speaking with you guys today.
Excellent, thanks a lot, Ken. So I'll, with my great technical expertise, I will now try and share my screen. The first thing that we have to get to. Hopefully you'll see something that looks a little bit like a presentation, everybody.
Yeah, we can see it.
Thumbs up for that. Excellent. It's a little bit slow on my side here. Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody for taking the time. I know it's getting late in your day to talk to us. As Bruno said, I'm Jeff Mills. I run biz dev across Europe and a lot of Asia at the moment, and I'm also taking over partnerships, which is I've been working with Neuralab for well over a year anyway. We know each other really well. And yes, I have been in the industry for a long time, but not just this industry, quite a few different software industries. You may not know, but Automatic is our parent company. Automatic is a whole bunch of brands, including WordPress VIP and WooCommerce, but also other things like Parsley Analytics and Tumblr and a whole bunch of other companies, but normally around the ecosystem of WordPress. There's a couple of reasons for that. If I go to the next stage, if we look at WordPress VIP, yes, we're part of Automatic, and Automatic itself has 1,700 employees around the world. We've always been a distributed company, so pandemic hasn't affected us. We've always worked from home. This is kind of normal life for us. The only difference has been in the last 18 months is that all of our family sits with us as well, rather than just us at home. But yeah, we're quite used to working in distributed fashion. I think we're in something like 70 countries worldwide, so we've got a great distribution. We've been heavily invested in through third parties. The most notable or noticed name is Salesforce, who have heavily invested in us. We have great partnership with them. And we have a great market cap at the moment of $6.3 billion as our valuation. We're also one of the top contributors to WordPress. A lot of our staff actually work on WordPress core and do updates for that. Our head of security does a lot of security stuff in there, as a for instance. We're owned by Matt Mullenweg, who co-created WordPress back in 2003. I think it was 2003. And then as a subdivision, WordPress VIP actually has about 240 employees. And we're growing rapidly. So I joined at the beginning of last year, just before the pandemic, and I think I was employee number 100. So in the time that I've been here, we've gone from 100 to 240 employees. We have about 500 WordPress clients. We only deal with WordPress, as you'd imagine, but they're all enterprise level. The difference between us and other hosts is we don't deal with anyone else. We don't deal with bloggers. We don't deal with small scale. We're all enterprise. So when our customers call us, they're getting a developer to developer experience and someone who knows what they're talking about. They're not going to tell you to turn it off and on again and hope. We're serving at least 5 billion page views a month. I think the numbers are way higher than that, but we have quite a few customers that are now running headless. So page views isn't quite the number that we would look at anymore, but it's a good indicator when we look out there what we're processing. A lot of you guys know this because you work with WordPress every day, but there's some numbers in here that may be new to you. The famous one is probably the first one, that over 40% of the web is built on WordPress, which is great. Interestingly, that's a lot bigger, 10 times bigger than the next one below us at about 4%. The next column on here shows that in the CMS space, we're even bigger. We're 65% of the global CMS market in the world, which is really impressive. The thing that I always look at is this third column, because we are looking at just enterprise. So the third column represents the top 10,000 websites in the world and what percentage is run with WordPress. And they're at 46%. And that's really important to VIP because we need to keep a handle on who's doing what at scale or highly secure so that's really good. And if we look at that, the next one below is still at 13%. So we're a great magnitude forward of anyone else in the space. So welcome to VIP. This is WordPress VIP. So we're made up of obviously WordPress, which is our content management. We have enterprise commerce, which is Woo, and Ken will wow you with his presentation at the end of this. And on the far side there, we have content and analytics and optimization under the guise of Parsley Analytics, which WordPress VIP purchased this year, and we're integrating very heavily into the system. So rather than just being a WordPress host, we're actually growing this out. And this will continue to grow throughout 2022 with all sorts of DXP options. And importantly, it doesn't mean you can't still do the plug and play things you want to do with WordPress, but we are going to tightly integrate with some market leaders in certain areas. We put a wrapper around all of that as the host. So we give you an enterprise platform. We make sure all security and support is all handled for you. And also we've heavily invested into the WordPress ecosystem. So at WordPress VIP, we don't build anything ourselves. That's where people like Neuralab come in because they know what they're doing and we don't know that so much for end customers. As well as technology partners and also just the general community. We're very heavily invested in there. Going back to the middle slide here and looking at security and support, we're the only WordPress host that's FedRAMP certified, which doesn't mean too much to us in Europe, but in the US, it means that we can host things like the White House website. That's how secure our platform is. Oh, I said, oh, sorry, I went one too far. Let's go back here. The way that we operate is we own all our own data centers. There are 30 worldwide. We own them right down to the metal. And that way we can make sure that they're fastest, the most secure. We don't get noisy neighbor stuff because we only do WordPress and everything is containerized. And that's how we manage to stay top of the tree. And to just prove that, we go out to outside analysts to look at how good we are. And we're always at the top of this tree, the response to first byte. And this will lead really carefully into Ken's presentation about doing Woo quickly as well, is that we make sure our servers are running so quickly. We also make sure that we're scalable. Again, if you've got a very large Woo host or you're hosting Woo on a very large scale, you need to make sure that the backend's doing all it can to work with that. And we have elastic serving for all our customers. It doesn't matter what's going on, we're going to run with it. If we look at the statistics here, this was US election week for the review signal, and we were running 200,000 requests per second. And we didn't slow down, we didn't falter, nothing started falling over, we just run with that. And this diagram is kind of a similar case as well. One of our larger customers is New York Post. And they started off with about 2.5 million page views per day when we first started working with them back in the mid-2010s, growing up to about 10 million page views per day. And then one day last year, they had that huge spike you can see at the end where it doubled in size, over 20 million page views compared to 10 normally. Now, we monitor 24/7 for DDoS attacks and any other security flaws. And our boffins realized this wasn't an attack, this is real traffic. So we made sure everything ran smoothly. We found out the next day that lots of websites that day had crashed and burned because that was the day of the Kobe Bryant air crash in the US. And the news agencies in the US went completely nuts overnight, but we didn't skip a beat and we managed running as always. We also make sure that not only are we running at scale, but our customers realize they can get hold of us as and when they need to. So we have, as you can see from the map there, people all around the world. We have something like 35 people in 60-something countries doing support on 15,000 tickets a year. And we have the most demanding SLAs as well. We have a 15-minute SLA for our big companies. And realistically, what happens when an urgent ticket comes in, it goes out to all support staff at the same time, so people can respond immediately. It's normally seconds. And in fact, because we're monitoring it 24/7, we may see a problem occurring before our customers and start telling them about it. Gartner thinks we're doing the right thing as well, which is always nice to have Gartner branding you on something, but they realize that we're really pushing into the enterprise WordPress space now. We are a proper leader in that space. And just to kind of almost round off here, just a few of the type of clients that we have, just to kind of really hammer home that we're looking at enterprise scale clients that really do know what big volumes are. This is a small selection of who we're working with. Probably a few years ago, it was very publishing heavy, but that's moving very rapidly now into IT, bank, finance, insurance, all sorts of other areas outside of just pure publishing. And you can have these, you'll see this on the video afterwards, but anyone who wants this can ask me for the slide deck just to see this in vertical form too. But with that said, the most important person on this call is Ken, because he is the Woo guy. So Ken, I'm going to pass over to you now, and you can start talking about how we've processed Woo at scale.
Thank you, Jeff. You're giving me too much credit. Share some. I guess Bruno, you need to.
I think you.
Oh, or you need to stop sharing
now.
First.
Yeah, that was probably me just hogging the screen.
Oops. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Woo, and then we'll get into some examples of customers that have scaled and the details of scaling too. So bit overview about Woo. We are the #1 e-commerce platform, 3 million sites per built with using WooCommerce, some of these other ones you've probably heard of, Shopify, Magento, they're all not quite there yet. So we are still the market leader in e-commerce. Growing incredibly fast, right? 3 million stores, about 31 billion transacting through Woo. TPV is transaction processing volume in 2021's target, 70% growth last year, and probably about the same growth this year. Our growth aspirations are really high. We want to basically grow 5x in the next couple of years. So I'll talk a little bit about the teams and go to market in a second here too. So I'm part of the customer success team, and often people ask me, what's customer success? Right? So I work with agencies like you. I work with our counterparts in VIP, Josh Fosberg, and the sales team. And we're also building out our own sales team at Woo. But I work with agencies, sales to support the customer through the journey. Right? If you look at a typical customer journey, there's some early decision making on when they decide to buy the product, and we hope to influence that decision making. We don't do enough of that right now, but as we build a go-to-market team, we're going to start influencing that. And my team right now really kicks in during the onboarding process, right? So we support agencies, and it's a free service, right? We offer it to customers, agencies. We support you through design. We support you through solutioning, quality control to make sure that the customer launches successfully, because if there's no launch, there's no expansion. And how I get measured is through retention and expansion, right? So we want to keep these customers on Woo because they're important to us, and we want to expand. We want them to use more of our products and services. And that's usually at the next few steps here. That's the adoption, scaling. And then eventually what we want to do is we want to get our customers to a point where they're strong advocates of our product. We want our customers to help us sell. Right? So that's kind of the aspiration with this customer journey. So this is how my team operates. Some of the specifics of the journey, I'm not going to go into details, but you're probably familiar with these. These are some of the things that we do or customers are doing at each step of the journey. So we can help influence them at these activities and get them beyond the step and onto the next step successfully. Before I dive into scaling Woo and customers and things like that, we are building out a sales team. So we are building out a go-to-market sales team. And I know you're a VIP partner. We are going to work with our VIP partnership folks like Jeff, and there's probably going to be some Woo partnership program that's going to be working closely with the VIP partnership program. So just keep that in mind. We're looking to launch that probably in the next 3 months or so. Okay. So I'll talk a bit about scaling Woo. So I'll start with some customer examples here. First customer is HelloBody. It's probably one of my favorite customers. It's a global brand. They started in Germany. Revenue-wise, they're in the hundreds of millions. So I can't give you the specific number, but it's a big business. They have 11 shops using Woo, generating about 25 to 50,000 orders a day. So they do a lot of influencer marketing, and if an influencer mentions their product, the order volume spikes tremendously. One thing really neat about this company is, they're always looking at, they have a small development team of 4 to 5 people only. So 4 to 5 people supporting a business that's in the hundreds of millions is pretty impressive. But one thing I really like about how they look at Woo is they look at the plugins and they always think about, does it make sense to build or buy, right? And that's something a lot of agencies need to look at too, right? When you look at a plugin, does it make sense to build or buy? And they always test the plugins. They make sure the plugins are scalable. They make sure the plugins are using the tables appropriately before they adopt the plugin. And a lot of times when they look at a plugin, it may have 10 things and they only need 2 of those things. So they take a decision to build it in those instances. So it's a really smart way of going about at evaluating plugins. And I think a lot of our agencies like you probably do something like that. So it's really impressive how they think about it and go about it. Next customer is a company called nutribullet. You probably heard about them. They make personal blenders. They started in the infomercial space. They kind of stumbled into e-commerce. They started selling blenders, I think about a couple of years ago, and their business just took off. So they're going to grow into tens of millions this year. And they were single digit, like a couple of million just a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? So their business is growing like wildfire. They're looking to expand too. So they are actually owned by a large, DeLonghi, the European appliance company. So they're looking to expand to Europe this year. We're supporting them through that expansion, using more of Woo, integrating with their ERP accounting system and things like that. They're also starting to sell subscription. If you look at the bottom here, you see they sell ingredients that go into the blender. The one thing that I find really interesting about this company is they have an ERP system. They use NetSuite, and they're looking to move a lot of the NetSuite capabilities like inventory management, shipping into Woo, because they just find it so much easier to have everything in a consolidated e-commerce system. So we're kind of supporting them through that journey. Okay. Next customer is a company called Bloomscape. You may not have heard of them. They are an indoor plant seller based in Michigan, the state of Michigan in the US. This company is, I think, only 3 years old, so they're relatively new, and they're in the tens of millions. They're probably going to hit 100 million sometime next year. What's really interesting about them is they also have greenhouses, and they ship through Woo and all that. So the key for them is, because plants are perishable and they need to be shipped a certain way, and they're shipping from Michigan where the weather is cold, logistics is a challenge. So they really need to have a tight logistics system and to be able to have a smooth process when the order is placed to actually shipping from the greenhouse. And they're doing all of that in Woo. The other thing that's really interesting about them is how they look at scaling and using plugins is they only have about 15 to 16 plugins on the site. So I think most of you, working in the WordPress ecosystem, you've come across customers with 50, 60. I've seen customers with close to 100 plugins. Right? So they do a real good job of managing the plugins they use. As you know, right? Fewer plugins, fewer conflicts, easier to support site. So they've done a real good job with that. Next customer is a VIP customer. So they went over to VIP, say about 4 months ago. Fast growing beauty brand. They're planning to grow 5x in the next 12 months. And what's different about them is they not only sell the product, but they offer consultative services through a subscription on the product. So you'll see a lot of customers in e-commerce doing that, selling subscriptions, selling additional products to differentiate the product. And like I said, they are a VIP customer. They went over to VIP because they've looked at a lot of hosting platforms, and they felt like VIP is the best solution for them to expand and scale their site without any issues. So I'll dive a bit into scaling. So I'll present a few ways of scaling. A lot of this is looking at how to handle large databases, right? As you know, right, you guys work with WordPress and probably Woo. The database does become problematic. You have post meta tables, and those tables can get really big, right? Each order that you create in Woo can lead to 40 to 60 different records in that table, right? So the first way to scale is through HyperDB, which is replication. And feel free to ask any questions, right? In a traditional database, you have rewrite, updates, deletes, all going into one database. If it's replicated, you have 2 instances of the same database spread across, right? 2 pieces of hardware, 2 different databases, however you want to set that up in your hosting environment. And by the way, this is used by VIP. And you can schedule, basically, you can set up different transactions that go into each database, and then databases themselves are kept in sync because they're replicated. So in order to do this, you do need MySQL replication turned on. You're separating the transactions, and also because you are replicating as well, you also get high availability, right? So you get a lot of redundancy just by setting this up. But this is just one approach to scaling a large database. And we have customers doing this. Next approach is called archiving. Probably less common in our customer, probably less common way of scaling. But as you know, order and post meta tables, they can get big. A lot of businesses want to delete data, but what this customer has done in this instance is they basically have 2 different systems, and they're archiving order data and post metadata that's greater than 90 days old. So they have a script and a job that runs anything that's 90 days old. They move it into a different system, and this system is a read-only system. And this is a pretty big customer. They're in the hundreds of millions. So their customer service people look at the read system. If they need to update an order, they actually have a UI where they can move the order back into the production system, do any updates to the order, and then it'll move back into the read system. So it's a really elegant way of having an ongoing archiving system, and at the same time, not burden your database, right? Another example is scaling through custom order table. And I don't know how much you guys know about this particular. This is actually a plugin that's offered by Liquid Web. As you know, at the post meta table, each order you create, multiple records, multiple entries get created. So whenever you're doing any kind of lookup, right, the queries get complicated. There's multiple joins going on. What this does is, and this actually takes advantage of the CRUD enhancement that was made to Woo about 4 years ago. So what this does is this basically creates one order table and it flattens the record, right? So instead of having multiple entries in post meta, you have one record in the custom order table with all the fields that you need. So reading data, writing data is a lot easier, right? And this is by Liquid Web. And it's a very simple and elegant way to do it. It's a plugin you install, you run some scripts to migrate the data from order and post meta order into the single custom table, and then off you go. And there's ways to roll it back to should you decide not to use this, not to use custom order table going forward. So it's a real simple and quick way to do it. And we have other customers doing it this way too. Okay. Lastly, I'd say the best way to scale is probably through VIP. The customer success team at Woo is relatively new. We're working with a lot of large customers, and we've introduced VIP to several of our larger customers. And at some point, inevitably, these customers, they don't want to deal with, WP Engine or GoDaddy, because those platforms, you hit a wall at some point, right? They're not gonna structure it in a way where they can help the company scale infinitely, and certainly don't have the security and the monitoring that VIP has. So what I often do is when I see customers reach a certain size, when they're struggling to scale their system, even though they're applying some of these examples and methods that I talked about earlier, if they're struggling, then I send them over to VIP, and pretty much all their problem goes away once they sign up with VIP. Okay. And that was my presentation. Any questions? I see there's some.
I have a question.
Sure.
So what do you think is a good metric of scale? Is number of users, orders, add to carts, number of checkouts?
Yeah, order volume, products are really key. So if a store has a lot of product, you do need to think about scaling. If they have a lot of orders, obviously you have to think about scaling too.
Okay, so Ken, who in your opinion is the biggest tech competitor to WooCommerce stack, and why?
I will say we are still, so VIP is at the very high end. Some of those customers Jeff mentioned are large sites, millions of views, page views a day. I would say WooCommerce, we're still in the SMB space. So I think our sweet spots are sort of businesses that are probably in the 5 to 50 million range, right, in terms of sales volume, GMV, right, gross merchandise volume. Beyond that, there are examples of customers like the ones I've shown you are beyond 50 million. It takes a little bit of work to get those types of databases and systems to work. You do need expertise at that point. You do need to implement some of those methods I talked about, but I would say our sweet spot is up to 50 million, which means our competitors are probably Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento to some extent, although they have larger stores. And a lot of times when you look at stores that exceed hundreds of millions, they inevitably go to something custom, right? A lot of them start building out a custom solution on their own to sort of differentiate themselves from competitors. So, but we see Shopify and BigCommerce a lot.
Okay, thanks for that. And the question for both of you, what are some of the typical myths that you need to debunk when selling enterprise solutions?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, actually, the biggest one I get, sorry, jumping in, Ken, is price. Is that I think as soon as people see the VIP logo, everyone thinks that we're not going to get out of bed before we hit $5,000 a month, and it's just not true. Yes, we are more expensive than your average host, because we do a fully managed service. And also all the things I mentioned before have been elastic and 24/7 monitoring. So we do pile a lot of service in there. But we have some smaller customers. Our kind of get out of bed price is roughly about $25,000 per year. So it's more like $2,000 per month. And that's we see it so often. And in fact, we see even write-ups today. We see someone has published something saying, this is what we are. And also the second one on from that is because we are so security conscious, we don't let you move on your own site. And that's just not true either. So the way that we work at VIP is that we separate content and code slightly compared to your normal WP admin view. So if you want to add things like plugins or themes, it's actually done through a GitHub repository rather than directly through WP admin for your own security. And what we will do, we will immediately, as soon as you put some code into GitHub ready to promote, we will immediately give you back a report that says how secure it may or may not be, and point out the places that you may want to look at. Unless it's a very serious problem, at that point we obviously won't let it through because it's going to affect lots of things. It's up to you to make the decision whether you're happy with that degree of security risk or not. But that's another myth we definitely have to get through, is that we stifle innovation because we don't let people through, and that's just not true at all.
Yeah, for me, thank you. For me on the Woo side, I would say scaling is a concern with a lot of big companies, and I presented some ways of scaling. And the problem is there's a lot of perception out there. Often perception is truth, right, to people. The scaling methods I talked about are proven, but the problem is the knowledge is not prevalent in the community, right? So developers and a lot of agencies don't know about these different methods of scaling, and we're starting, and I think we need to do a better job of educating people, getting more content out there, getting more examples of large customers and how they scale. So I'd say that's probably the biggest issue.
Thank you both. We have a question from Ivan Igor, who asks, what would you pick for a solid hosting requirements for an average Woo store with few thousand of products and average of few hundred orders daily?
Good question. I'm not sure I can answer that because I probably don't know the Woo scaling side so much, Ken, but have you got kind of any view on that?
Yeah, VIP is a great solution, but it's not for everybody, right? We always try to position VIP. Automatic also has other smaller hosting platforms, right? So that the pre-VIP platform. So we have Pressable, we have WordPress.com. Yeah, so both of those are nice environments to set up a small store. If you're in the hundreds of orders, you can probably set something up in WordPress, and it's relatively cheap. The good thing about that is you set it up in WordPress. If you grow, you can move over to VIP, right? Because it's all in the automatic family.
Okay, so Gresham, you raised your hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
I would say so. If the e-commerce merchant can't afford WordPress VIP, I would basically go with Kinsta. Because they have like solid packages for this kind of like average Woo store that has a couple of thousands of products. The biggest metric is basically PHP workers, because PHP workers in the Nginx engine, they practically handle all of the volume. So number of PHP workers on one virtual machine will basically decide what's like a solid hosting requirement.
Okay, thanks for that. So if there aren't any more questions from the crowd, I have one. I think, Jeff, this one is for you. Okay, we have one question before that from Stipica, who asks, what kind of page caching would you recommend?
Well, it's easy from a VIP point of view because we handle that for you. We don't need to do any other page caching. We do all of that for you. As for plugins, I suppose I can't even answer that because we don't worry about that at VIP. So maybe maybe someone else on here has some views on that they can share.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Not so
sorry,
far.
I don't know the plugins that well to know about that. So
Yeah, I mean, page caching. Page caching is basically decided on the hosting level. So every hoster has its own like set of rules for both server side and allowed browser side caching. I mean, like obvious solutions are Rocket Cache on the browser side, but some hosters do not they do not allow this kind of caching. So it's basically first you need to decide on your hosting company, and then talk with them about what is the appropriate caching solution for your Woo store, because there are now like thousands of options. I mean, the WordPress ecosystem is so big, so you have like thousands of options on the server side caching and thousands of options on the client side caching. So it's kind of like mind blown. It basically depends on the hosting company.
Great, thank you. So Vanya is having a question. Is there an incoming solution so we can store product data, orders, and all of the other Woo stuff in separate DB tables as opposed to WP options?
Yeah, so we as a company are, and I don't know if there's a solution, that plugin that does this, but we as a company are looking at, are starting to seriously look at scaling, right, and the database, because as you know, right, Woo is built on top of a content management database, right? So we're looking at an initiative called custom tables. It's going to take a few years to implement, where we structure the database in a more traditional transactional way, right? So it's going to be more normalized, but that's longer term. And I don't know if there's any plugins out there that will, I think there might be some where it fragments the table into more of a normalized form, but we as a company are looking at that right now, but it's a couple of years away.
Thank you, Ken. So Tihomir asks, are there any inquiries from your customers on making WordPress content available through smart speakers, example, Amazon Alexa?
Interesting question. Now, I know that has been mentioned somewhere, but not from one of my clients. So I can't answer it in detail. But I do know that in the US, this has been spoken about. But I wish I could speak to it more, but I can't, I'm afraid. But I do know that there's something in there has been happening.
Thank you. Ivan Igor has another one. How would you do an update of a live Woo store with orders happening meanwhile during the staging of store to the live update?
Yeah, I think your hosting company has sort of options to promote an environment from staging, test to production. And there are plugins out there that allow you to do that too. But you should always, tell customers, whatever you do, right, always account for some downtime, even though it's minimal, and make sure everything's tested, and hopefully that's all done. And in the event that if you promote everything to production and there's problems, prepare for a rollback, right? But usually the hosting companies, and there are plugins out there available that allow you to promote.
Go on, Kresha.
There is a concept in software dev. It's called blue-green deploy. So I don't know the specifics, but if you can Google like blue-green deploy, it basically handles that. So some old connections go to the blue server, and the new connections go to the green server, and they're I don't know the specifics, but you can Google it.
Vanya has another one. He says, realistically, will Automatic come to a stage where all the plugins need to be tried and tested before being rolled out? We are seeing a ton of conflicts happening lately with premium and paid plugins in various items.
Yeah, that's a good question, and a really tough one for Automatic to handle, because it's an open system. It's completely extensible. The 9-year-old down the road could build a plugin if they wish and roll it out. Or I could do one, and I'm not technical enough to really build one, but I could do it. And we don't control people who make paid for plugins even. So what we've built into the VIP system is this idea of, you can't just throw in a plugin through WP admin. It has to go through a process, and we offer staging service to make that happen. And that's the way we try and help. But I'm I'm not sure that there would be a way of Automatic to be the controller of plugins.
So on the Woo side, and I think somebody says talking about WooCommerce.com store too, but I think similarly, right? It is a problem, and a lot of times I hear customers complain about plugins. So there's a new version of Woo that gets released, and we've increased our, we've expedited our release process, right? We have releases more frequently now. A lot of the plugins lag. Of course, plugin conflict is a big issue. So our marketplace team have certainly heard a lot about this. They are looking at ways of improving the plugins and improving quality control. But I don't know if there's a plan right now, but I know they've heard this loud and clear from me, from other customers. But I know it's something that they're going to have to address in the near future.
Thanks. So I have another one more broad than these technical ones. I think this one is more for you, Jeff. What is the largest WordPress implementation you have witnessed, and can you elaborate on the complexity?
Well, the largest I know of through the amount of requests hitting is AccuWeather. There are billions of requests per day hitting through AccuWeather.com. Over here, we have the Sun newspaper is rather large, which is in the many millions per day. But yeah, AccuWeather is kind of one of the biggest ones that comes to mind. So it's an interesting one. I suppose that goes back to one of the questions you had before about debunking myths, is that WordPress can't scale, let alone WooCommerce can't scale. And when people see the figures of something like AccuWeather hitting the CMS in the background and just the pure volume that's going in and out of that, it's quite an eye-opener.
Thank you. Vanya has another one. Thanks, Vanya. So he asks, how about the cleaner way of handling what autoloads and what doesn't? More of a WordPress than a WooCommerce question, but the idea is to help control things better from the dashboard of the CMS itself.
Oh, wow. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that one. So I don't know, Krishna, if you've got something on that, but I can't answer that one, I'm afraid.
I'm not sure to what Vanya refers when he talks auto loads.
Options mostly.
Yeah, I mean we can take it up with our dev crew and then later it through social media or some later blog post, right?
Yeah, or if it's a question I can take back
sure
somewhere, I'm happy
this.
to as well.
Yeah. But I believe this is mostly a theme, like a custom theme topic. No. Okay, we will ask our dev crew and answer you that through our blog post after this meetup.
Okay, thanks for that. Stipica asks, what do you say to people who say that WordPress is bloated code and unsecure?
That's a good one. Well, I suppose that goes back to the things we spoke about before, is that we're going to take the unsecure thing to start with. We have people like the White House, HSBC, Santander, Al Jazeera papers, all very high targets for attack, all running with WordPress. If WordPress becomes insecure, it's quite often because it's extensible, and someone can write a plugin that may expose something you don't want to, which again is why VIP exists for the enterprise, is that we're in there to say, look, this is going to expose something. It can be something really innocuous, like a forms plugin that in the background you don't realize is actually siphoning off data somewhere else. So we'll highlight things like that are happening. So they're the sort of things that we see. As for bloated code, I don't know, I don't see that in my everyday life, maybe because we're only looking at this thing at scale and people don't talk about it in that way. I've certainly heard it with downloadable themes. You know, you get a theme off the web and you just download it, and this thing is full of stuff. And the amount of people that complain about WordPress slowing down, and then you say, well, you got a theme with 1,000 options in it and you're using 2 of them. This is really going to slow you down. And the same for plugins as well.
Yeah, I can add about unsecure. So this is a typical myth on all of our meetings with future clients. WordPress core is as secure or more secure than PDF, Windows, and Linux. So basically, in software dev, you have this like concept which is CVE. It's common vulnerabilities errors. It's basically a database of all software packages and their security errors. So basically, WordPress is more secure than most of the tools that people normally use in their offices, like as I said, PDFs, Windows, Office, Linux. So the WordPress core itself is, I would say, highly secured. The problem is, of course, a bloated theme and plugins, which are basically third party code. So if developers keep an eye on that, the whole site will be tightly secured. About bloated code, it's basically mostly connected to team development. So if you are building a custom theme, which is really tight and you can control every layer, you can have a web application that is pretty slim.
Okay, cool. Do we have any more questions for the guys? Okay, we do. Any thoughts given on high variation products over 2000 each and variation thresholds? How to speed them up?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's one that I haven't looked at yet. We do have customers using a lot of variation products, but I'll see if I can dig a little bit deeper into this to see what kind of performance problems and thresholds that we could encounter with variation. But that's a good question. It isn't one that I've encountered.
Yeah, it's like a step-loaded variation thing. Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about step loading, like loading parts of the variation at one time instead of, yeah, okay. I'll check with our team on this to see what are some of the ways to optimize variation products, but it's a good question. Probably apparels, is that what those are? 70,000 variations, clothing with different sizes and different colors.
Oh, car parts.
Car parts.
Car parts. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll dig into this one. I'll get back to you. Yeah, we have one customer out there. I didn't mention them today, but they are a big clothing reseller. They basically resell last year's fashion, like Calvin Klein and a lot of the major brands. I believe they have 1.2 million clothing products, as you can imagine. So there's a lot of variations. So I'll dig into this a little bit more and get you some info on how to do this.
Yeah, so Vanya and everybody else, you can hook me up on a meetup page for Ken contact, and when he gets the answers, I'll hook you up. Is that okay with you, Ken?
Yes,
cool,
that works.
Great. Do we have, sorry? Uh-huh.
I love the last comment, it's great.
Vanya is going strong. Do you have any more questions or comments? Okay. If not, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining in, especially you who were asking the questions and participating. And special big thanks goes to our guests, Ken and Jeff. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And hopefully we're going to see you soon. Live.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to come back over to Croatia, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks all.
So Jeff, have a great evening, and Ken, have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye.